I never thought a single word could shatter everything I believed about family, loyalty, and the man I'd raised like my own son. But when Derek looked me dead in the eye at that Sunday dinner and called me trash in front of everyone, something inside me didn't just break. It crystallized into something harder, clearer, and absolutely unforgiving. 2 weeks later, that same man would be on his knees, and I would have to decide just how merciful I really was. My name is Virginia, though everyone in our tight-knit Charleston community knows me as Ginny. I'm 58 years old, and for the last 33 years I've poured every ounce of love, sacrifice, and wisdom I had into being the kind of mother who shows up, not just physically, but emotionally, financially, spiritually. My daughter Natalie came into this world when I was just 25, young enough to still be figuring out who I was, but old enough to know that this little girl would be my purpose, my North Star, my reason for becoming better than I'd ever imagined I could be. Natalie grew up watching me work 2 jobs to keep us in a good neighborhood with good schools. Her father, well, he'd made his choice to leave when she was 3, sending birthday cards twice and child support exactly never. So it was just us, and honestly we made it work beautifully. I became her mother, her father, her cheerleader, her disciplinarian, her best friend when she needed one, and her adversary when she needed that too. I taught her about strength by showing her a woman who refused to be defeated by circumstance. I taught her about grace by never speaking ill of her father, even when she asked the hard questions. I taught her about love by being present for every recital, every parent-teacher conference, every heartbreak, every triumph. She graduated from college with honors, a degree in marketing that I'd worked overtime for 3 years to help finance. She landed a great job at a tech firm in Atlanta. She moved into a beautiful apartment, started building her career, and I watched with such pride as my little girl became this remarkable, independent woman. And then, 4 years ago, she met Derek. Derek Thompson walked into our lives at Natalie's company holiday party, and I'll admit, my first impression was positive. He was handsome in that clean-cut, ambitious way, 30 years old, working in finance, always dressed sharp, with a smile that seemed warm and genuine. He came from a good family in Savannah, his parents still married after 35 years, both professionals, both active in their church and community. On paper, Derek was everything a mother could want for her daughter. Stable, ambitious, from a good background. He had that confidence that comes from never having to struggle, never having to wonder if the lights would stay on or if there'd be enough groceries to last until payday. When Natalie brought him home for the first time, I cooked my grandmother's famous pot roast, set the table with my good china, and welcomed him with open arms. He complimented the food, asked thoughtful questions about my work as a nursing supervisor at Charleston Medical Center, and even helped clear the dishes without being asked. Natalie's eyes sparkled when she looked at him, and that's all any mother really wants, to see her child happy, to see them loved, to see them building something beautiful with someone worthy of them. They dated for 2 years before Derek proposed, and it was a beautiful proposal from what Natalie told me, sunset on Folly Beach, the ring her grandmother's vintage setting that his mother had saved for him, the whole 9 yards. I cried happy tears when she called me that evening, her voice breathless with joy. I told her I loved her, that I was proud of her, that I couldn't wait to welcome Derek officially into our family. And I meant every word. Back then I meant every single word. The wedding was a year later, a gorgeous October ceremony at a historic plantation venue outside Charleston. Spanish moss hung from ancient oak trees. The weather was perfect, and Natalie looked like an absolute vision in her dress. I'd saved for years to help pay for that wedding, not because Derek's family couldn't afford it, but because I wanted to contribute, wanted to feel like I was giving my daughter the wedding she deserved. I walked her down the aisle myself, and when I placed her hand in Derek's, I looked him in the eye and said quietly, just for him to hear, "She's my whole world. Take care of her." He nodded solemnly and said, "I promise, Ginny. I promise." That promise lasted exactly 3 years before it started showing cracks. The first year of their marriage was beautiful, or at least it seemed that way from where I stood. They bought a gorgeous townhouse in a trendy Atlanta neighborhood, decorated it with that effortless style that young professional couples somehow manage. They hosted dinner parties, took exotic vacations, posted those perfect photos on social media that made everyone comment about relationship goals and couple envy. Natalie seemed happy. She'd call me twice a week, tell me about her projects at work, about the new restaurant they'd tried, about the weekend trip to the mountains they were planning. And every time we talked, I felt that warm satisfaction of knowing my daughter had made it. She'd built a life I'd only dreamed of giving her. But somewhere in year 2 something shifted. The phone calls became less frequent, more rushed. When I'd visit, which I did every couple of months, there was a tension in the house I couldn't quite name. Nothing obvious, just little things. The way Derek would make comments about the groceries Natalie bought, calling them wasteful. The way he'd interrupt her when she was telling a story, finishing her sentences or correcting small details that didn't really matter. The way he'd check his phone constantly during dinner, his attention always somewhere else. I told myself I was being oversensitive, projecting my own past onto their present. After all, what did I know about successful marriages? Mine had crashed and burned before it even really began. Maybe this was just normal couple stuff, the kind of adjustment and friction that comes with building a life together. Maybe I was being that mother, the overprotective, overly involved one who couldn't let go, couldn't accept that her daughter was grown and living her own life. So I kept quiet. I bit my tongue when Derek made dismissive comments about Natalie's career, suggesting she was working too hard for not enough recognition. I said nothing when he'd make jokes at her expense during family gatherings, little digs about her cooking or her sense of direction or her tendency to be forgetful. I watched Natalie laugh along, but I could see something dimming behind her eyes, some light that used to shine so bright starting to flicker and fade. Year 3 was when I started to really worry. Natalie had lost weight, and not in a healthy way. She looked tired all the time, shadows under her eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. She'd stopped talking about her work with that passionate enthusiasm she used to have. When I asked if everything was okay, she'd plaster on that bright smile and say everything was fine. Great, actually, just busy with work and life, and you know how it is, Mom. But I did know how it was. I knew the sound of a woman trying to convince herself that everything was fine when deep down, she knew it wasn't. I knew the look of someone slowly shrinking themselves to fit into a space that kept getting smaller and smaller. I'd lived it myself those 3 years with Natalie's father before I finally found the courage to choose myself, choose my daughter, choose a different life. If you're enjoying this story so far, please hit that like button. It helps me keep sharing these real-life experiences with all of you. The real trouble started about 6 months ago, right around the time Derek got promoted to senior vice president at his firm. Suddenly, he was making serious money, the kind of money that changes things, that shifts power dynamics, that makes some people forget where they came from and who helped them get there. And Derek, I came to realize, was exactly that kind of person. Started with the car. Derek came home one day with a brand new BMW, sleek and black and expensive as hell. When I asked Natalie about it during one of our calls, there was a pause that lasted just a beat too long before she said Derek felt he needed a car that matched his new position. That image was important in his line of work. I asked if they'd discussed such a major purchase together, and she changed the subject. Then came the comments about the townhouse. Suddenly, their perfectly lovely home wasn't good enough anymore. Derek started talking about needing more space, a better neighborhood, something that reflected their new status. He'd make pointed comments when they visited friends who lived in mansion-style homes in the suburbs, saying things like, "This is what we should be working toward, Nat. This is the level we need to be on." The way he said "we" always bothered me because it was clear he meant himself, his level, his status. Natalie was just expected to go along, to support, to facilitate his climb up whatever ladder he'd decided to scale. But I still kept my mouth shut, still told myself that this was their marriage, their life, their choices to make. I'd raised Natalie to be strong and independent, to know her own mind and speak her own truth. If something was wrong, she'd tell me. She'd handle it. She'd figure it out. God, I was naive. The explosion happened on a Sunday in late September, one of those perfect early fall days where the humidity finally breaks and the air smells like possibility. Derek and Natalie were hosting a family dinner at their place. Derek's parents were in town, and they'd invited me and Derek's younger sister, Brielle, along with her husband, Chad. It was supposed to be a nice family gathering, a chance for everyone to catch up and enjoy a meal together. I'd driven up from Charleston that morning, bringing homemade pecan pie and a bottle of good wine. When I arrived, Derek's mother, Constance, was already holding court in the living room, talking about their recent Mediterranean cruise and showing photos on her phone. Derek's father, Raymond, was on the back deck with Derek, both of them nursing whiskeys and talking about golf and the stock market. Natalie was in the kitchen, and the moment I saw her my heart sank. She looked exhausted, stressed, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, an apron covering what I could tell were her nicest clothes. The kitchen was a disaster zone. Pots on every burner, the oven timer beeping, dishes piled in the sink. She was trying to cook an elaborate 5-course meal, the kind of thing you'd see in a fancy restaurant, and she was drowning. I immediately rolled up my sleeves and started helping, falling into that easy rhythm we'd always had in the kitchen together. As we worked, I asked her gently why she'd taken on something so complicated, why she hadn't just ordered from a caterer or kept things simple. She laughed, but it was a brittle sound like glass about to shatter. Derek wanted to impress his parents, she said. He'd planned the whole menu, insisted everything be homemade and perfect. She was just trying to execute his vision. His vision. Not their vision. His. I felt anger kindle in my chest, but I pushed it down and focused on helping my daughter get through the evening. We managed to get the food to the table only 20 minutes behind schedule, and honestly it looked beautiful. Natalie had worked so hard, and despite her stress, she pulled off something genuinely impressive. We all sat down to eat, Natalie and Derek at opposite ends of the table, his parents on one side, me and Brielle and Chad on the other. The first course was a butternut squash soup that was absolutely delicious, and I made sure to tell Natalie so. Constance nodded approvingly but then launched into a story about a soup she'd had at some 5-star restaurant in Barcelona, and how this was quite good for home cooking. The backhanded compliment stung, but Natalie just smiled and nodded, thanking her mother-in-law graciously. I watched Derek, waiting for him to defend his wife, to acknowledge the effort she'd put in, to tell his mother that Natalie's cooking was incredible and she should be more appreciative. But he said nothing. He just continued eating, scrolling through his phone between bites. The main course was herb-crusted lamb with roasted vegetables and a red wine reduction. I know Natalie had practiced making that sauce 3 times to get it right. As we ate, Raymond started talking about Derek's promotion, asking questions about his new responsibilities, his team, his prospects for future advancement. Derek expanded in his father's attention like a flower in sunlight, talking at length about his deals, his strategies, his vision for the company's future. Natalie sat quietly at her end of the table, occasionally getting up to refill water glasses or bring out more bread. No one asked her about her work. No one acknowledged that she just landed a major account for her company, something she'd texted me about excitedly just days before. She was invisible, a servant in her own home, and I could see the resignation in her eyes, like she'd accepted this as her role, her place, her reality. I couldn't stay quiet anymore. When there was a break in the conversation, I said brightly, "Natalie, honey, tell everyone about that major campaign you just landed." She's being modest, but my daughter just brought in a 6-figure client for her company. I'm so proud of her. Natalie blushed, looking pleased but also nervous. Before she could say anything, Derek laughed, not a warm laugh, but something dismissive and cold. "It's a nice little win," he said, emphasis on little. "Though I think she's still figuring out how to manage that account effectively. It's a learning curve for her." The condescension in his voice made my blood boil, but I kept my smile fixed in place. "Sounds like more than a little win to me," I said evenly. "Natalie's always been brilliant at what she does." Derek's eyes flickered to me, something hardening in his expression. "Well, sure, Ginny. Though I think we can all agree that in the grand scheme of things, there are different tiers of professional achievement. Some of us are operating at a level that requires a certain degree of sophistication and strategic thinking that—" He stopped himself, but the implication hung in the air like smoke. Some of us. Not Natalie. Certainly not me, with my nursing career and my middle-class background and my second-hand furniture and my used car parked outside next to all their luxury vehicles. Natalie's face had gone pale. "Derek," she said quietly, "that's not—" "I'm just being honest," he said, cutting her off. "No need to get sensitive about it." That's when Constance decided to chime in because apparently, the apple didn't fall far from the tree. "You know, Derek has a point. There's a certain pedigree that matters in upper-level business. Not everyone is raised with the same advantages, the same understanding of how these worlds work." She glanced at me, her smile superficially kind but her eyes cold. "No offense, Ginny, but you have to understand that Derek and Natalie are moving in circles now that require a certain level of polish. Background matters." The table went silent. Brielle looked uncomfortable, staring at her plate. Chad cleared his throat awkwardly. Raymond, oblivious or complicit, just nodded along with his wife. And Natalie, my beautiful strong daughter, looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. I felt my face flush, felt that familiar heat of humiliation mixed with rage. But I'd dealt with snobs before, people who thought money and pedigree made them better than everyone else. I knew how to handle this with grace. I was about to respond calmly, to deflect and redirect, to not let them see that their words had landed. But then Derek spoke again, and what he said changed everything. "Let's be real here," he said, leaning back in his chair with that smug confidence of someone who's never had to fight for anything in his life. "This is exactly the kind of thing I've been trying to explain to Natalie. When you come from trash, you carry certain habits, certain limitations with you. And those habits can hold back someone who's trying to rise above their circumstances." The word hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Trash. He called me trash. Not directly, not technically, but the meaning was crystal clear. He was talking about my background, my life, my choices. He was talking about the years I'd worked doubles at the hospital to keep Natalie fed and clothed and educated. He was talking about the sacrifices I'd made, the dignity I'd maintained even when things were hard, the grace with which I'd built a life from nothing. He'd summed all of that up, all of me, all of my worth, with one ugly, dismissive word. Trash. I saw Natalie's mouth open, saw her eyes fill with tears. I saw Brielle look genuinely horrified. Even Raymond shifted uncomfortably in his seat. But Constance just nodded approvingly, like Derek had finally said something she'd been thinking all along. My hands were shaking. I carefully set down my fork, placed my napkin beside my plate, and stood up from the table. Everyone's eyes turned to me, and in that moment, I felt something inside me shift and lock into place. Something cold and clear and absolutely done with accepting disrespect in the name of keeping the peace. "Thank you for dinner," I said, my voice steady despite the fury coursing through my veins. I looked at Natalie, whose tears were now spilling down her cheeks. "Baby, thank you for the beautiful meal. You did an amazing job and I'm so proud of you. As always." Then I turned to Derek, and I let him see everything I was feeling, the anger, the disappointment, the absolute contempt. "Derek, I've kept quiet about a lot of things over the past few years. I've bitten my tongue when I wanted to speak up, given you the benefit of the doubt when I had doubts, respected the boundaries of your marriage even when I saw things that concerned me. But let me be very clear about something right now. That woman you just sat there and allowed your mother to insult, that woman you just implied comes from trash, she is my daughter. And if she comes from me and I'm trash in your eyes, then you need to take a long, hard look at who you married and decide whether you deserve her. Because from where I'm standing, you don't." I grabbed my purse and headed for the door. Behind me I heard chairs scraping, voices rising, Natalie crying. I heard Derek call out, "Oh, come on, Ginny, don't be so dramatic. I wasn't talking about you specifically." I stopped at the door and turned around one last time. Derek was standing now, looking annoyed more than anything else, like I was ruining his nice family dinner by having the audacity to be hurt by his words. "Yes, you were," I said quietly. "You were talking exactly about me. And the truly sad thing is that you don't even have the integrity to own it." I left. I walked out of that house, got in my car, and drove back to Charleston through tears that I only let fall once I was safely on the highway, away from their judgment, away from their disdain, away from the casual cruelty of people who'd never had to worry about anything more serious than which country club to join. I cried for my daughter, trapped in a marriage with a man who clearly didn't respect her or her family. I cried for myself, for all the years I'd worked so hard to give Natalie a better life, only to watch her marry someone who saw those struggles as something shameful rather than something to be honored. And I cried because I knew what was coming. I knew this wasn't over, that this moment was just the beginning of something much bigger and more painful. When I got home that night, I sat in my living room, my modest, comfortable living room with its thrift store furniture and family photos and plants I'd nurtured for years, and I made a decision. I was done being quiet. I was done accepting disrespect. I was done watching my daughter diminish herself for a man who would never see her value. Whatever happened next, I was going to fight. Not with drama or pettiness, but with the same strategic intelligence and determination that had gotten me through nursing school while raising a baby alone. that had helped me work my way up to a supervisory position at one of the best hospitals in South Carolina, that had kept me and my daughter afloat when we had every reason to sink. Derek thought I was trash. He was about to find out exactly what this trash was capable of. The next 2 weeks were some of the hardest of my life, and I've had some very hard times. Natalie called me the night of the dinner, sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. She apologized over and over for what Derek had said, for how his parents had behaved, for not defending me the way she should have. She said she'd confronted Derek after I left, that there had been a huge fight, that he'd accused her of being overly sensitive and taking his words out of context. Out of context? As if there was any context that made calling someone trash acceptable. I told Natalie that she had nothing to apologize for, that none of this was her fault, that she'd been put in an impossible position. But I also told her something I probably should have said years ago. I told her that I was worried about her, that I'd been watching her change over the past few years, watching her become smaller and quieter and less herself. I told her that the man she'd married didn't seem to respect her, and respect was the foundation of any real love. She got very quiet on the phone. Then she said in this small broken voice, "I know, Mom. I know." Those 3 words shattered my heart into 1,000 pieces. She knew. She'd known for a while probably. She'd been living in that awareness, carrying it around like a weight, trying to convince herself that things would get better, that she could love him enough to change him, that she could make herself into whatever he needed her to be. We talked for 2 hours that night. She told me things I'd suspected but hadn't wanted to believe, about how Derek criticized everything she did. Her cooking, her clothes, her hair, her career choices, her friendships. About how he'd isolated her from her friends, always finding reasons why they couldn't make plans with other people. Why she needed to be available for his work events and his family and his needs. About how he controlled their finances despite her salary being almost as high as his used to be before the promotion, making her ask permission for purchases over $100. About how he'd started coming home later and later from work, smelling like expensive perfume that wasn't hers, with receipts from restaurants she'd never been to. By the end of that conversation, I wasn't just angry anymore. I was coldly, clearly furious. And I was determined. I spent the next few days doing what I do best: research, planning, and building a network. I started with my own connections at the hospital. One of the cardiologists I worked with was married to a family law attorney, one of the best in South Carolina. I called in a favor and got Natalie a consultation appointment, which I didn't tell her about yet. I wanted to have options ready for her when she was ready to consider them. Then I reached out to my friend Beverly, who worked in banking and had connections throughout the Atlanta financial sector. I asked her very casually if she knew anything about Derek Thompson, if his name had come up in any circles, if there was any word on the street about him. Beverly promised to ask around discreetly. I also called my younger brother Simon, who worked in private investigation. Yes, I know how that sounds. Hiring a PI to look into your daughter's husband sounds extreme. Sounds like I was overstepping. But I needed to know what we were dealing with. I needed facts, evidence, a clear picture of who Derek really was when he wasn't playing the role of successful executive and devoted husband. Simon tried to talk me out of it at first, warned me that I might not like what I found, that sometimes it's better not to know. But I insisted. If there was something to find, I wanted to find it. If Derek was as terrible as I suspected, Natalie would need proof. And if I was wrong, if I was letting my hurt feelings color my judgment, then I'd deal with that and apologize and back off. Spoiler alert. I wasn't wrong. While all this was happening behind the scenes, I had to maintain some appearance of normalcy. Derek didn't call me to apologize, which told me everything I needed to know about his character. Constance actually called once, but instead of apologizing, she tried to smooth things over by saying that sometimes family dinners get tense, and we all say things we don't mean, and wouldn't it be nice if we could just move past this awkwardness? I told her politely but firmly that her son had called me trash, and I wasn't interested in pretending that hadn't happened just to make everyone comfortable. I said if Derek wanted to make things right, he knew where to find me and how to offer a genuine apology. Then I ended the call before she could sputter out whatever excuse she was preparing to make for him. Natalie, meanwhile, was stuck in that horrible middle position, trying to maintain her marriage while also processing the truth of what had happened, what had been said, what it all meant. She came down to visit me one Saturday, making the drive to Charleston by herself. We spent the whole day together, walking along the Battery, sitting on my porch swing, cooking dinner together like we used to when she was young. She looked so tired, so beaten down. And I realized that what I was seeing wasn't just the result of one bad dinner or one cruel comment. This was the accumulated weight of years of subtle diminishment, years of being made to feel less than, years of having her confidence and joy slowly eroded by a man who was supposed to be her partner and protector. Do you think staying silent about concerns in your child's marriage is the right thing to do? Or should parents speak up? Tell me in the comments what you would have done. Over coffee at my kitchen table, I finally worked up the courage to say what needed to be said. Baby, I started carefully, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen with an open heart and mind. She looked up at me, those beautiful eyes so much like they were when she was a little girl. Except now they carried a weight that no child should ever know and no grown woman should have to bear. I told her about the lawyer consultation I'd arranged. I told her about reaching out to Beverly and Simon. I watched her face carefully, prepared for anger, for accusations of meddling, for defensiveness. But instead, she just nodded slowly and said, "Okay. Just okay." Like some part of her had been waiting for this, had been hoping someone would come along and help her find the way out of a maze she'd been lost in for too long. "I'm not telling you what to do," I said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "This is your life, your marriage, your choice. But I am telling you that you have options. You have support. You have people who love you and will stand by you no matter what you decide. And you have the strength to do whatever you need to do, even if it doesn't feel like it right now." She started crying then. Not the quiet tears she'd been holding back, but real body-shaking sobs. I moved around the table and held her while she cried, the way I'd held her through every hurt and disappointment and heartbreak of her life. And I told her what I should have been telling her all along, that she was remarkable, that she was worthy of real love and real respect, that she didn't have to settle for someone who made her feel small just because he had a nice salary and came from a good family. That evening we made a plan. She would go back to Atlanta and act normal while we gathered information. She wouldn't confront Derek about anything yet, wouldn't tip her hand. Meanwhile, I would work my connections, get the facts we needed, and prepare for whatever came next. It wasn't dramatic or impulsive. It was strategic and smart, the way women who've survived hard things learn to be. Beverly called me 3 days later with information that made my stomach drop. Derek's reputation in the financial community was apparently more complicated than his polished exterior suggested. He'd been involved in some questionable deals, nothing illegal exactly but definitely ethically gray. More importantly, Beverly had heard from multiple sources that Derek was known for his expensive tastes and his wandering eye. There were rumors about him and a junior analyst at his firm, a 25-year-old named Madison, who apparently accompanied him to business dinners and conferences with suspicious frequency. Simon called the next day with even more damning information. He'd been following Derek for less than a week, and already the pattern was clear. Derek was having an affair, and he wasn't even being particularly discreet about it. The same Madison from Beverly's intel was meeting him at upscale hotels during extended lunch breaks, joining him for drinks after work, riding in his car to venues where they definitely weren't discussing business. Simon had photos, nothing explicit but compromising enough. Derek and Madison laughing intimately at a bar. Derek's hand on her lower back as he guided her into a hotel. Derek kissing her in the parking garage of his office building, where he apparently thought no one would see. When I saw those photos, I felt a rage so pure and so cold that it almost scared me. This man had called me trash. This man who was cheating on my daughter, who was betraying the vows he'd made in front of God and family, who was risking everything good in his life for some affair with a girl barely older than Natalie had been when they met. This man had the audacity to judge me, to question my worth, to imply that I was somehow beneath him. The hypocrisy was staggering. The arrogance was breathtaking. And the way he'd made my daughter feel like she was the problem, like she needed to be better and more sophisticated and more whatever he decided she was lacking, all while he was out there living a double life, made me want to do something rash and destructive and probably ill-advised. But I didn't. Because I was thinking about Natalie now, about what she would need, about how to handle this in a way that would give her the best possible outcome. This wasn't about revenge, even though God knows I wanted it. This was about protecting my daughter, and giving her the ammunition she needed to walk away from this marriage with her dignity and her financial security intact. I called Natalie and asked her to come back down to Charleston. I told her we needed to talk, that I had information she needed to see. I heard the fear in her voice when she asked what kind of information, but I just told her to trust me and make the drive when she could. She came that weekend, and I sat her down in my living room with a cup of tea she didn't drink and a box of tissues she definitely needed. I showed her everything, the financial information from Beverly, the photos from Simon, the timeline of Derek's deception that stretched back at least 6 months, probably longer. I watched my daughter's face as she processed the evidence of her husband's betrayal. I watched her move through shock and denial and anger and grief in the span of about 20 minutes. I watched her crumble and then, slowly, painfully, start to gather the pieces of herself back together. "I knew," she whispered finally, staring at a photo of Derek with his arm around Madison. "I mean, I didn't know, but I felt it. I knew something was wrong. I just kept telling myself I was being paranoid, that I was imagining things, that I needed to trust him more. This is what gaslighting does. It makes you doubt your own perception, your own instincts, your own sanity." Derek had been lying to Natalie for months, and he'd been so convincing that she'd started to believe the problem was her. Her insecurity, her jealousy, her inadequacy. "What do I do?" she asked me, and her voice sounded so young, so lost. "Whatever you need to do," I told her. "But let me tell you what I think you should do, and then you can decide if you agree." I laid out a plan. First, she would meet with the lawyer I'd lined up, get clear on her rights and options in a divorce. Second, she would quietly start separating her finances, opening her own accounts, documenting all marital assets, protecting herself financially. Third, she would gather her own evidence, maybe get into Derek's email or his phone records, make sure we had everything documented. And finally, when she was ready and when everything was in place, she would confront him from a position of strength, not from a position of hurt and confusion. "This is going to be hard," I told her. "It's going to hurt like hell. And there are going to be days when you question everything and wonder if you're doing the right thing. But baby, you deserve so much better than this. You deserve a partner who respects you, who's faithful to you, who builds you up instead of tearing you down. And if Derek can't be that person, and honey, I don't think he can, then you need to let him go." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "Okay," she said. "Okay, let's do it." The next 10 days were a masterclass in strategic planning and emotional control. Natalie met with the lawyer, a sharp woman named Diane Crawford who had a reputation for protecting her clients and making unfaithful spouses pay. Diane laid out exactly what Natalie needed to do to protect herself financially and legally. She also mentioned that in cases where there was infidelity, especially when combined with financial mismanagement or hidden assets, the courts tended to look favorably on the wrong spouse. Natalie started documenting everything. She screenshot Derek's credit card statements showing charges at hotels and restaurants. She forwarded herself emails from Derek's laptop when he left it open at home. She documented the times he said he was working late but was actually out with Madison. She even managed to get into his phone one night when he passed out drunk after a work event and found months of text messages that left absolutely no doubt about the nature of his relationship with Madison. The messages were disgusting. Not just because of the sexual content, though there was plenty of that, but because of the way Derek talked about Natalie to his mistress. He called her boring, uptight, too focused on her career, not sophisticated enough for the lifestyle he wanted to live. He complained about her family, specifically about me, about my working-class background, about how embarrassing it was to have a mother-in-law who was just a nurse when he was trying to network with the elite. Just a nurse. As if saving lives and caring for the sick was somehow less valuable than moving money around for wealthy people who already had more than enough. Reading those messages, I felt my resolve harden even more. This man wasn't going to get away with what he'd done to my daughter. He wasn't going to walk away from this marriage with his reputation intact and his finances untouched while Natalie picked up the pieces of her shattered life. While Natalie was gathering evidence, I was working another angle. Through Beverly's connections, I'd learned that Derek's company took violations of their ethics policy very seriously, especially when it came to relationships between senior executives and junior employees. There was a strict fraternization policy, and Derek had been violating it for months. If that information reached the right people, his promotion, his reputation, his entire career could be in jeopardy. I wasn't ready to deploy that particular weapon yet. but I wanted it loaded and ready just in case. Simon continued his surveillance, documenting every meeting, every hotel visit, every moment of Derek's double life. He even managed to get audio of Derek and Madison arguing in a parking garage, where Derek was promising to leave Natalie soon, but needed to wait for the right time. Apparently, the right time was after he could ensure he'd protected his assets and wouldn't lose too much in a divorce settlement. So Derek wasn't just a cheater. He was a calculating cheater, already planning his exit strategy and working to minimize the financial impact on himself. He didn't care about the emotional impact on Natalie, of course. She was just a problem to be managed, an obstacle to be navigated on his way to the life he really wanted with his younger, more impressive mistress. 2 weeks after that terrible dinner, after 2 weeks of watching my daughter work through her grief while simultaneously preparing for war, everything came to a head. It was a Wednesday evening. Natalie had texted me earlier in the day to say that tonight was the night, that she was ready, that she'd confronted Derek and things had exploded. She asked if she could come stay with me for a while, and of course I said yes. What I didn't expect was the phone call I received an hour later. It wasn't from Natalie. It was from Derek. I almost didn't answer. I stared at his name on my phone screen, feeling that familiar surge of anger and disgust. But curiosity won out. I wanted to hear what he could possibly have to say to me after everything that had happened. "Ginny," he said when I answered, and his voice was different than I'd ever heard it. Not confident or dismissive or smug. Desperate. Panicked. "Ginny, I need your help. Please, I'm begging you." I sat down slowly in my kitchen chair, feeling surreal about the entire situation. "You're begging me for what exactly?" "Natalie is leaving me," he said, and I could hear real fear in his voice now. "She's filing for divorce and she has all this evidence and she's threatening to. She said she's going to destroy my career, my reputation, everything. And I know you're behind this, I know you've been helping her, and I need you to talk to her. I need you to tell her we can work this out." The audacity of this man was truly spectacular. He cheated on my daughter. He'd emotionally abused her for years. He'd insulted me in my entire life. And now he wanted me to help him save his marriage and his career? Why would I do that? I asked, keeping my voice level and calm. Because I made a mistake, okay? I messed up. But I love Natalie and we can fix this if she'll just give me a chance. But she won't listen to me right now. She'll listen to you though. She always listens to you. "Derek," I said, and I let every ounce of contempt I felt seep into my voice. "Do you remember what you called me 2 weeks ago at that dinner?" Silence on the other end of the line. "You called me trash," I continued. "You implied that I was beneath you, that my life and my work and my sacrifices were worthless. You made my daughter watch while your family disrespected me, and you didn't say a single word in my defense. So tell me, why in the world would I help you now?" "I didn't, that's not what I..." He was scrambling now, trying to rewrite history in real time. "I was talking in general terms about different backgrounds and..." "Don't lie to me," I interrupted sharply. "Don't you dare lie to me. You meant every word you said that night, and we both know it. You think you're better than me, better than Natalie, better than anyone who doesn't come from money and privilege, and whatever else you think makes someone worthy of respect. Ginny, please. And you know what the really funny thing is? I was on a roll now, years of held-back words finally pouring out. You're the trashy one, Derek. Not me. Not Natalie. You. You're the one who lied and cheated and betrayed the woman who loved you. You're the one who violated your company's ethics policy by sleeping with a subordinate. You're the one who's been planning to leave your wife while pretending everything was fine, so you could protect your precious assets. So let me tell you something very clearly. I am not going to help you. I am not going to convince my daughter to stay with a man who doesn't deserve to breathe the same air as her. And whatever consequences you're facing right now, you earned every single one of them. You don't understand what you're doing, Derek said, and now the desperation was giving way to anger. If she goes through with this, if she reports me to my company, I could lose everything. My job, my reputation. Good, I said simply. Maybe that will teach you something about respect. Maybe that will teach you that actions have consequences. Maybe that will teach you that you can't just treat people like garbage and expect them to smile and take it. Trash, he spat suddenly, And there it was, the real Derek coming out when he didn't get his way. You actually are trash, you know that? You and your daughter both. I should never have married into your family. You're vindictive and bitter and… I hung up on him. I didn't need to hear any more. He'd shown me exactly who he was one last time, just to remove any possible doubt. My phone rang again immediately. Derek calling back, probably to yell more insults or make more threats. I declined the call. He called 3 more times. I blocked his number. Then Natalie called, and when I answered, she was crying but also laughing in that slightly hysterical way that happens when you're running on pure adrenaline and emotion. Mom, she said. Did Derek just call you? He did, I confirmed. He wanted me to convince you to take him back. I declined. She laughed again, louder this time. Oh my God, the nerve of that man. The absolute nerve. Then her voice got quieter, more serious. Mom, I did it. I really did it. I told him I knew about Madison, that I knew about everything, and that I was filing for divorce. And then I told him that I was going to make sure his company knew about his relationship with a junior employee, and that I was going to make sure everyone knew exactly what kind of man he really is. How did he react? I asked, though I could guess based on the phone call I just endured. He lost it, she said. At first he tried to deny everything, then he tried to minimize it, then he tried to blame me, said I'd been distant and cold and that I'd driven him to Madison. Then when I showed him all the evidence I'd collected, he completely fell apart. He actually got on his knees, Mom. He got on his knees and begged me not to leave, not to ruin his life, not to report him to his company. On his knees. Derek, who'd been so arrogant and cruel and untouchable 2 weeks ago, reduced to begging. There was something deeply satisfying about that image, even though I knew it didn't erase the pain he'd caused. What did you tell him? I asked. I told him, Natalie said, and I could hear the strength in her voice now, the steel that had always been there but had been buried under years of being diminished, that he should have thought about all this before he decided to betray me, that he should have thought about consequences before he decided I wasn't good enough for him, that he should have thought about respect and dignity and basic human decency before he treated me like I was disposable. Pride surged through me so strong it almost hurt. That's my girl, I said softly. I'm coming home, Mom, she said. To Charleston. To your place. I'm packing my things right now, just my personal stuff, my clothes, my documents. Diane said to leave the rest for now, that will handle the asset division through lawyers. But I need to get out of this house. I need to be somewhere that feels safe. Come home, I told her. Your room is ready. It's always ready. She arrived at my house just after midnight, pulling up in her car with 2 suitcases and a box of personal items. When she walked through the door, we just held each other and cried. For the end of her marriage, for the years she'd lost to someone who never deserved her, for the pain of betrayal and disappointment, but also for relief and liberation and the promise of a better future ahead. The next few days were a blur of legal paperwork, emotional processing, and strategic planning. Diane filed the divorce papers with all the evidence of Derek's infidelity attached. She also prepared a detailed report about Derek's violation of his company's ethics policy, ready to submit to his HR department if Derek tried to fight the divorce settlement or cause any problems for Natalie. Derek tried calling both of us repeatedly, leaving voicemails that ranged from apologetic to angry to desperate and back again. His parents called too. Constance actually had the audacity to suggest that Natalie was being overly dramatic, and that men make mistakes, and perhaps she should consider giving Derek another chance. I told Constance exactly what I thought of her and her son, using some language that I won't repeat here, but that felt extremely satisfying to say. Word started to spread through Derek's professional and social circles about what had happened. Apparently, Madison wasn't as discreet as Derek had hoped, and people started putting 2 and 2 together. The reputation Derek had been so proud of, the image he'd cultivated so carefully, began to crumble. People who'd admired him started whispering. Colleagues who'd respected him started questioning his character. And then, about a week after Natalie left, Derek's company got an anonymous tip about his relationship with Madison. Diane swore it wasn't from us, and technically it wasn't. Simon mentioned that these things have a way of getting around, and several people at Derek's firm apparently had suspicions already. Sometimes the truth just finds its way to the light. Derek was put on administrative leave while the company investigated. The investigation took all of 3 days before they found ample evidence of policy violations. Derek was given a choice: resign quietly with a neutral reference, or be terminated for cause with the details going on his permanent record. He resigned. That high-powered executive position he'd been so proud of gone. That salary that had made him feel so superior to everyone else gone. That trajectory toward even bigger success in status and wealth, completely derailed. I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel some satisfaction about that. Not because I'm cruel or vengeful by nature, but because sometimes, just sometimes, people need to face consequences for their actions. Sometimes karma needs a little help from careful documentation and strategic deployment of evidence. Sometimes trash needs to be taken out. Natalie struggled during those first few weeks. Even though she knew divorce was the right choice, even though she had undeniable proof of Derek's betrayal, ending a marriage is still painful. She'd loved him once. She'd built a life with him, made plans and dreams with him. Letting go of all that, even when it had become toxic, was a process that involved a lot of tears and anger and grief. But she was also stronger than I'd seen her in years. Every day she stood a little taller. Every day that light in her eyes got a little brighter. Every day, she remembered a bit more of who she'd been before Derek had started chipping away at her self-worth. She moved back into my house temporarily, taking over her old bedroom and slowly starting to figure out what came next. She took a leave of absence from her job to deal with the divorce and recover emotionally. She started seeing a therapist, working through the trauma of emotional abuse and betrayal. She reconnected with friends she'd lost touch with during her marriage, rebuilding her support system. And she spent time with me, and I have to say those weeks with my daughter back home were bittersweet. Sweet because I had her close again, because we could talk and laugh and just be together. Bitter because I knew the pain she was going through, and I would have given anything to spare her from it. The divorce proceedings moved surprisingly quickly. Derek didn't try to fight it. Diane had made it very clear that if he contested anything or tried to reduce the settlement, she would make sure every detail of his affair and his professional misconduct became part of the public record. Derek, having already lost his job and much of his reputation, wasn't willing to risk what little he had left. The settlement was generous to Natalie. She got the townhouse, a significant portion of their shared assets, and ongoing spousal support given that Derek's affair had directly contributed to the dissolution of the marriage. Derek also had to pay all her legal fees. His financial situation went from comfortable to considerably less so. He had to sell his precious BMW. He had to move from the townhouse into a much smaller apartment. He had to reckon with the reality that his choices had consequences not just for others but for himself. I heard through the grapevine that his relationship with Madison didn't last long after everything fell apart. Turns out that when the excitement and secrecy of an affair gives way to the reality of actually being together, and when the successful executive becomes an unemployed guy living in a one-bedroom apartment, the attraction fades pretty quickly. She left him within a month. Derek ended up moving back to Savannah, living with his parents while he tried to rebuild his career. His professional reputation was damaged enough that he couldn't get another position at his previous level. He ended up taking a job that was several steps down from where he'd been, with a salary to match. His parents, to their credit or lack thereof depending on how you look at it, stood by him through all of this. But I heard from Brielle, who stayed in touch with Natalie, that even they had finally started to see their son for who he really was. Constance apparently stopped making excuses for him after the full extent of his affair became clear. Raymond had some harsh words for his son about responsibility and character that were apparently long overdue. As for Natalie and me, we came out of this whole ordeal closer than ever. She eventually moved back to Atlanta, but into her own place, a beautiful loft apartment that she decorated exactly how she wanted it, with no one to criticize her choices or make her second-guess herself. She returned to work and threw herself into her career with renewed energy and confidence. Within 6 months, she'd been promoted, proving that Derek's dismissive comments about her professional abilities had been projection and insecurity on his part, nothing more. She started dating again eventually, taking it slow and being careful about who she let into her life. She's still figuring things out, still healing, still learning to trust again. But she's happy. Really genuinely happy in a way she never was with Derek. And me? I'm doing well. I'm still working at the hospital, Still living in my modest house with my thrift store furniture and my garden and my life that Derek thought was so far beneath him. But you know what? I'm proud of this life. I'm proud of what I built from nothing, proud of the daughter I raised, proud of the strength and resilience I've shown in the face of difficulty and disrespect. Derek called me once, about 6 months after the divorce was finalized. I don't know how he got my new number. I changed it specifically to avoid his calls. But somehow he tracked it down. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me one last time. "What do you want, Derek?" I asked, my voice tired but firm. "I just wanted to say," he began, and his voice was different again, smaller, humbler, genuinely remorseful, or at least a good imitation of it, "that I'm sorry. For everything. For what I said to you, for how I treated Natalie, for all of it. You were right about me. I was arrogant and cruel, and I took for granted something precious. I lost everything because of my choices, and I understand now that I deserved to lose it." I was quiet for a moment, processing. Part of me wanted to yell at him, to tell him exactly how much damage he'd done, how much pain he'd caused. Part of me wanted to hang up without another word. But mostly I just felt tired of him, tired of carrying anger and resentment that wasn't doing me any good. "Derek," I said finally, "I hope you mean that. I hope you've actually learned something from all this. I hope you become a better person who treats people with respect regardless of their background or status. But whether you do or you don't, that's not my concern anymore. You're not my son-in-law. You're not part of my family. You're just someone who was in our lives for a while and isn't anymore." "I know," he said quietly. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness." "You don't," I agreed. "But I'm going to give you something anyway, not because you've earned it, but because I'm choosing to let this go for my own peace of mind. I forgive you, Derek. Not because what you did was okay, it wasn't. Not because I think you deserve it, you don't. But because holding on to this anger and hurt isn't serving me anymore. So I'm releasing it. I'm releasing you. I hope you find a way to be a decent human being. But that's your journey to make, not mine to supervise." He thanked me, his voice thick with emotion. We said goodbye. I hung up the phone and blocked his number again. Because forgiveness doesn't mean leaving the door open for someone to hurt you again. It just means you're not going to let what they did keep you prisoner. Looking back on everything that happened, I can honestly say I have no regrets about how I handled it. Some people might think I was too involved, that I should have let Natalie figure things out on her own. But I don't believe that. When you see someone you love being hurt, being diminished, being trapped in a situation that's destroying them, you don't just stand by and watch. You step in. You help. You fight. And yes, there was a certain satisfaction in seeing Derek face consequences for his actions. I'm human enough to admit that. When he called me trash, when he treated my daughter like she was disposable, when he showed such contempt for everything I'd worked so hard to build, he started something he wasn't prepared to finish. He underestimated what this trash was capable of. He underestimated the strength and determination of a mother protecting her child. The story of what happened spread through our community and Derek's former circles, and I know some people viewed me as vindictive or overly aggressive in how I helped Natalie handle things. But I've received just as many messages from women, mothers, daughters, sisters, friends, thanking me for showing that it's okay to stand up, that it's okay to fight back, that accepting disrespect in the name of keeping the peace isn't actually noble. It's just another form of surrendering your dignity. One woman told me that watching what happened gave her the courage to leave her own toxic marriage. Another said that my refusal to accept Derek's behavior helped her recognize the subtle ways she'd been accepting similar treatment from her in-laws. These messages mean more to me than I can express, because they tell me that our story, painful as it was, helped other people find their own strength. Natalie and I talk about that terrible dinner sometimes, about the moment when Derek called me trash and everything shifted. She apologizes sometimes, even though she has nothing to apologize for. She says she should have defended me more strongly in the moment, should have thrown Derek out of her house right then and there. But I tell her what I told her back then. She was in an impossible position, and she handled it the best way she could at the time. What matters is what came after, the strength she found, the action she took, the way she reclaimed her life and her self-worth. That Sunday dinner was the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. It was the moment when Derek's mask finally slipped completely, when his true nature was revealed not just to me but eventually to everyone in his life. It was the moment when Natalie started to wake up from the fog of emotional manipulation she'd been living in. And it was the moment when I stopped being polite and accommodating and started being protective and fierce. Derek thought calling me trash would put me in my place, would establish some hierarchy where he was at the top and I was at the bottom. But all it really did was show me, and everyone else, exactly what kind of person he was. And in the end, the only one who ended up looking like trash was him. 2 weeks. That's all it took for everything to unravel for him. 2 weeks from arrogant insults to desperate begging. 2 weeks from thinking he had everything under control to watching his life fall apart. 2 weeks for karma, with a little help from careful planning and strategic action, to deliver a lesson in humility and consequences. I don't know where Derek is now or what he's doing with his life. I don't care, honestly. He's a footnote in our story, a cautionary tale about arrogance and cruelty, and the importance of treating people with respect. What I do know is that Natalie is thriving. She's building a life on her own terms, surrounded by people who value and respect her. She's happy and confident and more herself than she's been in years. And me? I'm still here in Charleston, still living my supposedly trashy life, still working at the hospital, still proud of who I am and what I've accomplished. I have my daughter back in a way I didn't for those years when Derek was in the picture. I have my dignity intact. I have the satisfaction of knowing that when someone tried to diminish me, I didn't shrink, I stood taller. So was I right to get involved the way I did? To help Natalie gather evidence, to hire investigators, to strategically deploy information that destroyed Derek's career and reputation? Some people might say no, that it was vindictive, that I went too far. But I sleep just fine at night. Because I didn't destroy Derek's life. He did that himself with his choices, his lies, his cruelty. All I did was make sure the truth came to light. All I did was protect my daughter and help her escape a toxic situation. All I did was refuse to accept being called trash by someone whose own character was seriously lacking. If someone treats you like you're worthless, like your life and your work and your sacrifices don't matter, remember this. Their opinion of you says everything about them and nothing about you. Your worth isn't determined by people who can't see it. Your dignity doesn't depend on the approval of people who don't respect you. And when push comes to shove, you have every right to stand up, fight back, and refuse to be diminished. Derek learned that lesson the hard way. And honestly, I'm not sorry about that at all. Where are you listening from? Share your country or location in the comments. I'd love to know. And don't forget to subscribe for more heartfelt life stories like this one. If you've ever been called something hurtful by someone who should have respected you, tell me how you handled it. Did you stand up for yourself? Did you let it go? I want to hear your stories too. With love and respect, Auntie Helen Stories.